Impact Wrestling has been around for over 20 years, and throughout those 20 years there have been some great feuds. But in today's video, we're going to look at my personal top 5 best feuds in Impact history. Number 5. Moose vs. Josh Alexander. Josh Alexander is now one of the top stars in Impact, but before that, his singles run started rocky in Impact as he lost the match to Brian Myers on a pre-show. This was kind of sad considering he was the longest reigning tag champion before that. Things started picking up when he won the X Division title and later won the world title from Christian Cage. He would only hold the title for a few minutes when Moose cashed in and won the title from him in front of his family. For the next few months, we got to see Josh grow as he beat the likes of Suzuki and Jonah. And during his run, he cemented himself as an Impact diehard, which was sad to see when his contract came up and it seemed like he wasn't resigning, as some speculated he would join his former tag partner Ethan Page in AEW. Things were worse when sites like Web is Jericho reported that Josh had left Impact as they couldn't come to an agreement. Things were then made to be worse when Josh Alexander posted a picture indicating he was doing construction work again, meaning Impact had an unfinished storyline, which was really disappointing. Turns out this was all a work, as Josh would return and would defeat Moose in the main event of Rebellion in front of his family, and from there on he would be the longest reigning Impact World Champion, surpassing the likes of Bobby Roode and AJ Styles. Number 4. Tessa Blanchard and Sami Callihan. Impact Wrestling has always been known for doing stuff differently, such as having a 6-sided ring or doing a reverse battle royal. And around 2019, they decided to bring intergender wrestling to a large scale, as it is mostly known as an indie thing. But Impact took the risk of doing it as their main storyline, and they were able to tell a great story where Sami Callihan didn't see Tessa as a woman but as a pro wrestler. And that's why he would treat her like he treated others, being able to spit in her face or hitting her with a baseball bat. The first match main evented Slammiversary, which is Impact's second biggest show of the year. They had a classic, and by the end, Sami showed Tessa some respect, thus proving she can hang with the man. The match was even voted 2019 Impact Match of the Year. There was a tag tournament where Sami and Tessa were partners and they won, thus having to face each other again to crown a number 1 contender for the world title. The match took place at Unbreakable 2019. I personally didn't watch this match as the production of the show was bad and unwatchable, but based on the reviews the match got, it was considered to be great, and Sami would win the match and go on to win the World Heavyweight Championship against Brian Cage. Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard would face off again for the third time at the Hard to Kill pay-per-view. So far, Tessa Blanchard was 0-2 in singles competition against Sami Callihan. Before the pay-per-view, Allysin Kay would tweet about Tessa being a bad person, which almost got her cancelled, and basically everything Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard worked for on the previous months was ruined with one tweet, as the Tessa allegations got more attention than the feud itself, and many wondered if Impact would make Tessa Blanchard the world champion, and they actually did put the title on her, much to the disdain of others. Now, I'm not basing this based on what happened outside the feud like the allegations, but basing it on what we saw on television and the story they were able to tell. And what I saw was some of the best storytelling I've ever seen. There was a few repetitive stuff here and there that took me out of it, but at the end it delivered. The reason why this is not ranked higher is that all the work put into making Tessa the top star of the company was wasted when the bullying allegations and her allegedly not wanting to show up and defend the belt got her fired. That's a sad way to end what was a great feud, and I think if she stayed with Impact, intergender wrestling would be a big thing in pro wrestling now, as we were already seeing other promotions removing the term women on the championship belt and thus calling it a world title, some saying the influence came from Impact Wrestling. Number 3 is James Storm and Bobby Roode. In a time where TNA had lost its identity with Hogan coming in, there was one thing he did right, and that was the feud with Bobby Roode and James Storm. As after winning the world title, Storm wanted his best friend to get the first shot at the title, but Roode would turn his back on Storm by smashing a beer bottle and taking the belt from Storm. They would face off a couple more times with Roode getting the better of Storm. One of the more notable matches is the steel cage match at Lockdown, where Storm gave Roode a last call super kick only for Roode to win by falling out of the cage. The most known match, however, takes place at the Bound for Glory 2012 pay-per-view, where the two were considered to be the biggest homegrown stars behind AJ Styles, and they had a crazy 17-minute match that is regarded as one of the best matches in Impact history. James Storm would win the match, and this ended the feud in my eyes. The reason this match is not ranked higher is that for some reason, the feud would continue after the Bound for Glory match, and I don't think any of their matches afterwards would top the Bound for Glory match. Number 2 is Gail Kim and Awesome Kong. In the early 2000s, women's wrestling was seen as a joke on the American scene. That was until Impact would start what was known as the Knockouts division, and the match to crown the first ever champion was set for Bound for Glory 2007, where Gail Kim would beat 9 other women in a gauntlet match to become the inaugural champion. She would have her second title defense against Kong on the 2007 Turning Point pay-per-view, as she would win in an intense match via DQ, meaning they would face off later again. And they did face off at the Final Resolution pay-per-view in probably the best match, as Gail Kim would once again defeat Kong in a 12-minute match. This was also one of their most known matches. Kong would finally defeat Gail Kim for the title on the 7th January episode of Impact, making her the second ever Knockouts champion. This feud revolutionized women's wrestling, and as of this recording, Gail Kim and Awesome Kong are the only 2 women in the Impact Hall of Fame, alongside the likes of Sting and Kurt Angle. Number 1, Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe was on a reign of terror as he was undefeated for 17 months in TNA. He had ran through the likes of AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, and Christian Cage. It seemed like no one could beat Joe until Kurt Angle made his TNA debut in what is seen as the best debut in company's history, as before signing with TNA, Kurt Angle was the hottest free agent, not just in professional wrestling, but in combat sport, as he was getting offers from MMA promotions. They had a brawl to kick off this feud and would have their first match at the 2006 Genesis pay-per-view, which is the most bought pay-per-view in TNA Impact Wrestling history, where Angle would beat Joe and ending his undefeated streak. They would have some other encounters later on in multi-man matches, but they would also become the tag champions after beating Team 3D, and their next match would be a winner takes all, in which Angle won to hold all of their belts. Personally, this was not a really strong match for the caliber of Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle, but it was a good match nonetheless. And seeing Kurt Angle hold all the belts, including the New Japan World Heavyweight Championship, is a great sight to see, and proved that Kurt Angle was one of the biggest stars back then. Samoa Joe would defeat Kurt Angle at the 2008 Lockdown pay-per-view in a match that seems to be inspired a lot by MMA. That was also one of their best matches in my personal opinion, and I put this feud at number 1 mostly for the sole purpose of them gaining so much traction of this feud, as they are responsible for the most bought TNA pay-per-view in company's history, that being the Genesis pay-per-view that did 60,000 pay-per-view buys. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please like, share and subscribe, and watch my last video where I talked about the top 5 people who quit WWE to sign with Impact Wrestling. Thank you.